Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into a survival story from the dark, winding roads leading up to Shimla. Honestly, what started as a totally normal road trip quickly spiraled into an absolute psychological nightmare. We're going to break down exactly what happened to this group of friends, step by step, to understand the rules of a highly localized, absolutely deadly supernatural phenomenon known as a Chhalawa. Because understanding exactly how this entity operates, it just might save your life on your next late-night drive. So let's get right into it. Okay, so let's start this eerie mystery exactly where the victims first realized that, the laws of physics had just completely stopped working. Picture this. A group of friends are on a bus speeding down a dark highway at 11 p.m. They pass this lone old woman just standing on the side of the road. Naturally, they assume she's just a local, right? Maybe looking for a lift. But then, shortly after, two of the passengers, Ashwini and Ranvijay, look out the window and see the exact same old woman standing ahead of the bus. Ranvijay whispers to his friend, "That old woman was 1 kilometer behind us. How is she ahead of us?" And right there, that is our massive first red flag. The entity is already messing with their sense of space and reality, letting them know that normal logic simply no longer applies out here. Tracking the timeline of that night really shows just how fast things go off the rails. The creeping dread begins with that impossible spatial glitch, and what was supposed to be a fun trip unravels in a mere 30 minutes. Right after that second sighting of the old woman, things start getting really bizarre inside the bus itself. One passenger, Ritik, reaches for a water bottle, but inexplicably, it's bone dry. Panic kind of starts to bubble up. Discomfort sets in. And suddenly, the passengers are demanding that the conductor pull the bus over right away so they can get out and grab some air. Now, the conductor practically begs them not to, warning them that they are in the dead middle of a dense, highly dangerous jungle. But they completely refuse to listen. So the doors open, and once they step off that relatively safe bus and into the pitch-black jungle, they are unwittingly walking right into a trap. And they immediately make their first catastrophic mistake. They split up. Ritik wanders off deep into the brush, Ranvijay and Ashwini stroll away holding hands. Another guy, Ishmith, tries to use the moment to flirt with his crush, Neha, but gets rejected. And out there in the dark, totally separated from the safety and light of the bus, the most terrifying modern realization hits them. They pull out their phones to check for a signal, and there is absolutely zero cellular network. They are entirely cut off from the outside world, totally isolated and perfectly positioned for whatever is hunting them. And this brings us to the monster's absolute core weapon, a lethal, flawless contrast between illusion and reality. Out in the dark, Ishmith, who's now all alone, suddenly hears a voice. It's Neha. All of a sudden, she's smiling, she's holding his hand, and she's suggesting they go take a dip in this beautiful, clean pond nearby to celebrate their new relationship. He is so deeply entranced by this perfect illusion that he ignores massive, glaring red flags. I mean, he literally doesn't question how she's suddenly walking incredibly fast through a dense, tangled jungle in high heels. He confidently steps into the quote-unquote pond, but instantly his feet freeze. The fake Neha bursts into this manic laughter and just vanishes into thin air. And that's when the horrifying reality sets in. There is no pond. He has walked straight into a suffocating, muddy swamp, and he sinks to his death, completely alone. Now, while Ishmith is out there fighting for his life, the rest of the passengers are experiencing a total breakdown of reality. They make their way back to the road, only to find their bus has completely vanished. The driver, apparently terrified by some hallucination of his own inside the vehicle, had literally just floored it and left them. So the group is stranded. But then, they see headlights approaching. Except, instead of stopping, their own bus just speeds right past them. And as they look through the windows as it passes, they clearly see Ishmith sitting inside, just staring blankly ahead, completely ignoring them. The sick twist? They have absolutely no idea he's already dead in the swamp, and that what they just saw driving by is yet another twisted manipulation of their minds. It is at this exact moment of peak, absolute confusion that an ice cream vendor suddenly appears. And I know, let's just pause and think about the sheer absurdity of this for a second. You're stranded in a terrifying, pitch-black jungle, people are missing, and suddenly a guy pushing an ice cream cart rolls right up to you. But surprisingly, this vendor isn't a threat. He actually delivers a crucial piece of lore, giving a name to this whole nightmare. He tells the terrified group that they have wandered into the territory of a Chhalawa. Now, a Chhalawa is described as an impure wind or dark spirit. It thrives in these desolate areas, and its true power isn't brute physical strength. No, its power is the ability to flawlessly hack the human mind, making you see, hear, and feel things that literally aren't there. So the key takeaway here is that a Chhalawa doesn't physically overpower you. It hacks your perception. Its hunting methodology is actually incredibly specific and calculated. First, it deliberately isolates you from the group. Second, it doesn't just turn into some generic scary monster. It takes the precise form of familiar loved ones, just like it did with Neha, because it knows you're naturally going to trust them. Third, it completely distorts the physical environment, making a deadly swamp look like a pristine pond. Ultimately, this thing feeds entirely on your confusion and your misplaced trust. If you believe the lie you're seeing, the Chhalawa wins. Armed with that knowledge, we can see exactly how two other passengers, Ratik and Rhythma, are fatally deceived. They actually ignore the ice cream vendor's warning, assuming he's just some local trying to scare them, and they wander deeper into the jungle. Eventually, they spot a kind old man calling them into his hut. He offers them a place to rest, hands them a nice, warm plate of food. It feels like salvation. But the very second they look down, the illusion shatters. That warm food? It's actually two severed human hands. That cozy little hut, it violently transforms back into its true form, a ruined, dusty, garbage-filled shack. Terrified, they run out and eventually spot who they think is their friend Ron Vijay, sitting at a tea stall. But he just starts laughing maniacally, and suddenly the entire group of people around them transforms into that same terrifying old man, swarming them and ending their lives. Meanwhile, the actual surviving group experiences the Chhalawa's power manifesting as a literal, terrifying glitch in reality. They manage to find a small roadside dhaba and sit down, just desperate for a single moment of normalcy. But then, they notice something super chilling. A beggar boy walks up asking for tea, and someone yells at him to leave. A split second later, a cot snaps and breaks, and two men tumble to the ground. Then, almost immediately, the beggar boy walks up again. He asks for tea. He is yelled at with the exact same words. The cot breaks again, the men fall again. The Chhalawa is running a flawless looping simulation, basically glitching the matrix. The survivors realize they're trapped inside yet another illusion and they just run for their lives. This all builds to a completely chaotic climax that finally reveals the only way to break a Chhalawa's grip. The survivors are sprinting blindly through the dark when they bump into the ice cream vendor again. He urgently tells them to follow him to his house so they can be safe. They're just about to go with him when suddenly a second ice cream vendor comes sprinting up from behind. He's carrying a small urn, screaming at them not to trust the first man. He grabs a handful of powder from the urn and throws it right into the air. And instantly, that first vendor, who was the Chhalawa in disguise the whole time, shatters like glass and completely vanishes. This intense intervention proves one very crucial rule about the entity. It might be entirely immune to physical fighting, but it absolutely can be banished. The real vendor explains that after the group ignored his initial warning, he actually went all the way home, dropped off his cart, and came back out looking for them. He reveals the only reason he can safely walk through this haunted stretch of jungle at night is because he always carries chandan ki lakdi ki basm, basically sandalwood ash. This secret ash actually disrupts the Chhalawa's impure energy. It is quite literally the ultimate and frankly the only defense mechanism you have against a predator you can't punch, you can't outrun, and you can't even see properly. The ash certainly saved the remaining survivors, but when the morning light finally breaks, it brings a really harsh reality. 3. That's the tragic number of friends who fell for the flawless illusions and never made it home. The vendor takes the survivors to his actual real home, and as the sun comes up, the Chhalawa's power totally dissipates. The group eventually catches a morning bus back to the city, but you can imagine, the victory was completely hollow. Ishmit, Ritik, and Rita May died on this trip simply because they trusted their own senses. A beautiful pond, a warm plate of food, and the familiar faces of their friends. Which leaves us with a pretty chilling final thought to consider the next time you find yourself driving down a lonely highway late at night. The survivors managed to escape, yes, but the entity wasn't actually destroyed. It was only temporarily banished by that sandalwood ash. So, is the Chhalawa already out there, waiting in the dark for the next bus to pull over? Just remember the rules we learned today. If you see someone standing alone on a desolate road, and then a few miles later you see them again, whatever you do, do not ask the driver to pull over. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and seriously, stay safe out there.